Hello and welcome to day 125 of 365 days towards racial change. My name is Thomas Nyback. Let's get right into it. We're talking about Black issues here in America, needs, wants, desires, impediments. Or seem to have an overall overarching theme the past couple days of white folks and the white mainstream as gatekeepers, and how Blacks allow that dynamic to persist, of course, in general, because we can find exceptions to rules when we deal with humans. It's all over the map. It'd be so much easier if we were an animal or creature, or our habits would be much more predictable in regards to one another. Oh, but humans have a free will on steroids. Having said that, two thoughts emerge from this project. First thought has two parts. First part is the Black mind. What is the Black mind, Black thought in the American moral and economic landscape? What I mean is, how is the Black mind operating? Is it passing along dysfunctions and impediments from generations, centuries ago, seeds of abuse, neglect, oppression planted in American slavery on steroids, very dysfunctional slavery. And conversely, on the second side of that same coin, that first thought of the mind is, does white thought behave in the same way? Are Blacks enablers of white thought, of privilege, power, entitlement? I'll tell you, I don't think we learned enough from the bus boycotts. The Black folks just need to just have a super boycott, and just start. We're in a space right now where Blacks can organize and realize some economic advantage without too much threat of white reprisal. Not so much back in the days when Tulsa, Oklahoma was sacked, Rosewood, Florida was sacked, other thriving Black communities sacked. I think America's past that to some degree. There'll be we can expect mainstream and white America to engage in other devices to derail some of that growth, but I think Black folks can deal with that. We've been dealing with much worse for centuries. But so that's the one thing about white thought. That do Blacks encourage it? Do Blacks enable it? If we keep buying white products and products of other groups antagonistic to Black growth, or groups that encourage Black vulnerability, especially economically. And is the white mind just kind of an understood subject in America and the world? The idea of entitlement, expectation of favor and privilege for white people. Is it just the thing that is, and those born on the white side of life just happen to get all the goodies and don't have to do a whole lot of mental navigation, bear the dysfunction of a nation or the world, keeping their finger on the button, so to speak, of power and control. All right, that's the first thought, the mind, the geist, of all people, groups. And then the second thought is my burden for financial literacy of Black folks. Today's word, leverage. Do we understand leverage? You know, I did a lot of, I've been in a lot of blue collar work. I've seen big machines moved and all this stuff. I know about leverage and fulcrums. I've seen them applied in the workplace. A machine shop is not worth its salt. Even automotive shops, if it doesn't have a good old what's called a shale bar, and a shale bar is just a big stupid piece of hard steel. It's very heavy, but it's got this little kind of a little lip on the end of it. It looks like it's good for nothing. It's worn out from use. It's very dull and banged up and whatever. And it's just this big, long, stupid bar. Something you see in the movies with people doing martial arts with. But I don't think they'd be as fast with this old heavy, ugly thing. But this shell bar is used to apply leverage at the base of a very heavy object. You know, so a person, you know, these machine shops I worked at probably ran, half a ton and up, 1,000 pounds and up, just dead weight, right? But if they had to be moved or adjusted for the just maybe the architecture of the shop needed to change, new equipment was coming in, you know, you apply that shale bar to get underneath the machine to start lifting it and making it, you're enabling it to be moved out of the way or to a new position. I say that in response to leverage. We're using leverage to get that heavy object. You know, I weigh 1/5, you know, a quarter at the most is my weight that I can displace on this object that weighs 3-4 times as me. I don't lift things that heavy, but with that little hook attached to that long heavy bar, I can apply that leverage, and that ginormous weight is at my mercy because I'm applying leverage to move it around. That's the financial literacy word for today. I hope I don't go into that every day, but leverage. Do we understand leverage? And what I mean is, especially is the loans. What we do with money, you know, loans are ways to compress time. You know, instead of saving up for 30 years to get a house, we can get the house now with borrowed money and then pay it off for 30 years. You know, but that's using the leverage. You know, and from the leverage, that money left over, we can leverage other endeavors. You know, but too often, people are like me. We get loans and we start eating the best foods and buy the most expensive toys, video games, clothes, stuff we can't afford in the long run, like vehicles and maintain stuff like that. You know, that's not leverage. That's not using leverage properly. Financial literacy, those who are financially literate will understand those opportunities when money comes. I got a guy at work, love him to death, good guy, and he got a refi on his home. And after all was said and done and the economic and financial smoke cleared, he came out with $60,000 disposable. And in my mind, with what I'm going through, I'm thinking investments, corporate structures. Yeah, yeah. So I didn't lay into them and start preaching because I don't really have experience yet in those areas. But boy, my mind was thinking like, it's at the, like this last seminar I was at. It was a real estate seminar, and the phrase I'll never forget. I may have heard it before, but I'll never forget. The guy says, money needs a job. That's what money does. And it's the same with the slavery issue and all that. The white folks leveraged black labor. White folks leveraged Native American land. The people, Aboriginal people who are here. They leveraged that, and look what they did with it. It wasn't just they didn't just come over here have a party. They leveraged it. They built empires, corporations with it, and it's still ongoing. I work for an internationally known logistics carrier, and there are people, family members of this business who've never touched a box. It's not like, I'm sure, I doubt it's like the movies where the patriarch sends their young son or daughter into the blue collar fray, so to speak. They're going to send them to business school, white collar. Maybe I can get my family in that position financially with some financial literacy. I got a lot of things to go. I don't even have a girlfriend right now. Let's get into today's work. Day 125. I'm inspired. I'll quickly go through this by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. We are referencing POWERNOMICS today. If you have any of his works. Black History Reader, 101 questions you never thought to ask. Black labor, white wealth, search for power and economic justice, and Dr. Anderson's national plan to empower Black America, POWERNOMICS, and we are on page 123 with the topic today. You can find Dr. Anderson at POWERNOMICS.com and the Heritage Institute down in Washington, D.C. Behind me, you see hashtag #us2. You'll find Black women there supporting one another, discussing their issues specific to them. Go to Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, kind of a Black Facebook. And if you found me here on the World Wide Web, here on YouTube especially, then you're technologically literate, and therefore you can find your flavor and your community. Today's subject begins maybe with some anecdotal information. I hope I'm using that correctly. There's all kinds of literacy. Grammatical stuff is still illiteracy. I'm working on that. But Donald Trump, there's a war going on in Washington, D.C. I'm not going to belabor this point, but it's, if you're a history of this time, it's early May. This is Cinco de Mayo weekend. And, but if you follow the news cycles of 2019 at this time, then, there's the government entities, legislative, executive, judicial branches are having internal power struggles, very problematic. One thing that's keeping the current president and the administration emboldened is an extremely low unemployment rate. Not since the 60s have they seen these numbers. So 50 some years, I think, is the total. These lows, so people are maneuvering financially. The economy's moving and rolling, I hope we're not seeing a bubble. I haven't seen any charts as far as stock market and the exchanges, but from what I've learned with my financial literacy, bubbles are there are some indicators of bubbles, but we can count on the Federal Reserve to do all of its best uh, not to allow that to run wild, and they do that through interest rates and all that stuff. Your financial literacy education is going to bring you into that information. But back to the current president, everybody's kind of working and maneuvering. The dollar doesn't still doesn't have its power. I work with a nice lady at work. She lives in her car. There's a person at a convenience store. She's living in her car out here where I'm at. So it's very challenging, you know. See, I don't know, jobs are one thing, but too many people are working two jobs. And even then, you know, a person is forced to choose between job or car. You know, we're just not getting there. But because of this low unemployment rate, the president seems to be emboldened. Let's get into today's topic with the few minutes we got left. And page 123, it's the heading is the mainstream economy and white majority. And past couple of days, I've been talking about whites as gatekeepers, blacks maybe in some ways enabling that white mindset and black mindset. You know, they're feeding off of one another. Problem with the blacks, constantly reaching, you know, this is the civil rights and social integration conversation continuing, where blacks continue to knock. We're knocking on the door. We want to participate in there. You know, ours isn't enough, so we want to be in there with you all, and that's a problem. Blacks, I'm finding from this study, blacks need to do more to handle their own business, so to speak. That's what Robert Kiyosaki might say to us. Um, Now, part of it is there are some issues which we don't get in these little segments here on YouTube. That there are systemic problems going on, but in this section, we're just going to point out three problems where whites exercise power and control to disadvantage black folks, black communities. One is in marginal jobs and pay. They monopolize jobs. You know, is when we could say one thing about the unemployment rate, but jobs are not hard to find. You can go scrape and clean somebody's floor. I mean, the any job board or listing going to have new hotels opening up. They need people to wash toilets, vacuum floors, and make beds and stuff. So there's always something out there to kind of get you, you know, suck the life out of you and your time, your most valuable asset, pay you little or just enough to make it back the next day, maybe get a day off, but probably even have to get another job to supplement that. So that's a way that whites disadvantage the black community. Number two, non-black businesses exploiting black communities, disposable income. I talked about. I'll go through some of our poor neighborhoods, and the billboards for cigarettes and alcohol almost touch my head. They're almost eye level with pedestrians. You know, you don't find that in the white gated community ever, right? And these people, you know, this illustration, Asians especially, that's the most visible. Asians with the convenience stores come in, suck those resources out of an already distressed community, and they take that back to their communities and enrich their communities. You know, the poor people, blacks, they'll just come in, work their asses off, and then deliver this those wares to these convenience store owners. And those convenience stores, they don't live in that neighborhood. They're out of there. They get in their car and go back to maybe a nice community surrounded by their own people, most likely as well. Um, and three, I got here a note, the mainstream, the overarching society provides just enough public assistance to avoid a riot. You know, they're going to make sure we're not going to go hungry, and that there are programs and all that. Nothing to enrich us. One of the things, you know, we can be divided on this is that at least there are what do you call it, vocational rehabs that are available. Learn a skill or trade, and that'll give us kind of a way in to their mainstream that's under their control and all like that. You know, I'm up in age. I can't hide my gray hairs anymore unless I wanted to color my hair and stuff like that. But I'm up there in age, and there's some angles. Remember Malcolm X movie? His gangster buddy had a stroke and saying he had angles. You know, so there's some angles for me. I can go drive truck again or do some other stuff, but I'd probably have some trouble getting into like a technologically tech field, being older and stuff like that. So, but there are options out there. We can get in, but we'd most likely be under the control of an overarching white mainstream. He also, in this brief section, he talks about infrastructure. He's really big about revitalizing some of America's abandoned cities. Are already happened. I live in a smaller city. It's an international city, but it's a smaller city. But parts of Philly, and we could obviously put Detroit, any big or older city. But Philadelphia had some. What I remember is a lot of abandoned buildings. About 20, 25 years ago, it was a very hot summer, and buildings in Philadelphia were just collapsing. We hear about it once in a while, but really it was an epidemic that was going on out there. Parts of North Philly are remind me of this. And these parts, you have these demolished structures, and then some structures still standing that have been taken over by homeless or whatever. It looks like seeing that from Nagasaki, Hiroshima, after the atomic bombs have been dropped. Just flat expanse with a few structures, and those structures happen to be American made and built safes, most of them. Crazy, crazy. But the infrastructure is important because the infrastructure actually is there underground now. It's probably compromised and would need some updating, but it wouldn't be hard. You know, there's infrastructure there. You know, with a little massaging, you could do something with that. Now, white folks are probably, eating that up. You know, it's probably was at one time a nice thriving white area. Blacks begin to do well. You get white flight. Blacks don't keep up, or the power structure or political configuration does not allow black participation to get that community what it needs, and the community just dissolves. What's left in that wake is erosion, destruction, and that they just let that go. And now there's a lot of things going on. Legalization of pods is making a lot of billionaires, and money's doing a real kind of different dance now, and young white people are just getting the fever and making it happen. Well, Dr. Anderson says, hey, there's no reason the black folks can't make it happen either. The infrastructure is there. It's not like we're building a brand new, like a Las Vegas, some city out in the desert. We got infrastructure, sewer, power, water lines there, even streets to some degree. We can organize and go in there, revitalize that as well. Now, some more issues with mainstream and white power is the favor with assimilated groups. Assimilated groups essentially are those that come voluntarily. Hispanics and Asians top his list here in his book, POWERNOMICS. You can put Arabs, Vietnamese, even Cambodians, a lot of other peoples come in and have favor. Russians, but we thrive in Russian communities all over the place. Those groups, they fit in well to that model, mainstream white power, and thrive. And they get favor, they get business favors and stuff. Not enough black people are knowledgeable and literate enough with some of the inroads and ways to get government assistance with business and things like that. Some things I need to research, but there are a lot of options out there that are still more favorable to these assimilated groups, but black people do kind of are able to navigate their way through there. And let me say, like, if you go that route, if you're black and you go that route, don't just go to get rich. Represent what's good in black folks, the potential in black folks, because there's people coming behind you that need you to have been successful before them. Be a good example. Okay, just don't run in there buck wild and make a mess. It makes it harder for everybody. And I'm saying that I've made messes at a lot of places with a lot of people. So I'm not saying that in a vacuum as though I am a saint, but I know there are places that I've been where it makes it that much harder for black people to navigate those communities and situations. I own that, no problem. I own a lot more than that. That's just the tip of the iceberg. So, at the end of this, I want to revisit language, how we use language. If you're following along, black people are always going to have a problem if the language is as though we keep saying the mainstream allows us, white people allow us. If white people would only, if the government would do this, we can't. We're speaking it out of our mouths. We're speaking it into existence, and that's a problem. We need to speak more black empowerment phrases. We can do that. How can we do that better? How do we get access to that? It's not about some organization or group. How can we organize together or make some situation happen in our favor, and we can divorce ourselves from the language that puts entitlement, white power, white privilege before us as between us and our goal. They don't have to be part of the picture at all, right? And it's the language. I think we can. One of our tactics is the language. Make the language more fruitful towards us, more positive for us. Okay, that's a quick thing. That's a quick piece offering today. I hope you're growing well with this year. I have. I'm starting to understand a lot. We're just a third of the way through here. Got a long way to go yet, and thanks for hanging in there with me. I appreciate the subscribers who comment, and I know, well, actually, I know all of you personally, the ones on the email list anyway. Keep hanging in there. Your comments are important. Email me back if you're on the email list, and I don't know, let's get together sometime. You have a great day. I'm Tomlin's Nyback, and that's another episode of 365 Days Towards Racial Change. I'll see you tomorrow.